Involves spawning. That's trying to establish the crop, the mushroom crop. And for you to do that well, you start by making sure you've pasteurized your substrate. Pasteurizing substrate essentially involves heat treatment. That's trying to kill off all the bacteria, let's just call them germs, all the germs that may be part and parcel of your substrate when you acquire it, right? Thereafter, you introduce the spawn into the substrate. Essentially, what you want to watch out for, well, I mean, for you to have a successful crop, you want to make sure the substrate, the pasteurization process itself is thorough. That's the first thing. Then the second thing, you want to make sure the substrate is no longer hot, right? So you let it cool for a while, but that's not essentially to make it cool all the way to 0 degrees Celsius. No, you just make it cool to around 37 degrees Celsius. Then you introduce your spawn. When you introduce your spawn, what's key there is to know how much spawn you are putting into a quantity of substrate. For instance, you can work with a rat, which could be, just to give a pointer, around 2%, 3% of the dry weight of the substrate, right? So in our case, we may be using maybe 5%. That's to say, if you are doing a ton of dry substrate, you will need to have about 50 kgs of spawn. So the essential process, the key things that are important whilst you are introducing your spawn to your substrate is you need to be hygienic. As much as we do this on the open, right? What we are keenly looking out for is, are the utensils that we are using clean enough, right? Are our hands clean enough, right? Are the bags that we are spawning into clean enough? So for us to be sure, the one thing we use there is it could be bleach. Some people go on and use formalin, but we have issues to do with the carcinogenic nature of formalin. So we don't use formalin here, we use bleach. Now the bleach itself is essentially a biodegradable compound. After introducing water to bleach and using it for a while, it biodegrades into salt and water. So using that essentially is as close to organic work as possible. So that's what we use for cleaning up our hands, cleaning up our utensils. How much of the bleach we use, essentially we could put a portion there, but we could put a quantity. But essentially 5 caps of bleach in about 20 liters of water is enough. And when that's done, when we are done spawning, which is introducing the spawn to the substrate, the next step is to incubate the bags. Incubation of the bags essentially is a process which takes between 21 days to 28, depending on the size of bag that you're using. Now, the lookout, I mean, the watch points there is the space that you're going to be using. Is it dark enough? Is it free from vermin? And also, is it an area that is hygienic enough for the work to happen, right? So, whilst that's happening, in our case, we're using a room that has racks in it. We hang the bags on the racks for the entire duration. When the duration is done, the next thing is to move the bags from the incubation room into the growing rooms. Now, the growing rooms are essentially rooms where you allow light in. Incubation happens in an area which is dark, but the growth of mushrooms requires light, because if you don't allow enough light for the mushrooms to grow under, you essentially push them to have the issue to do with, you push them really into growing long stems and so on and so forth. They have an aspect of phototropism within them. They start to follow where the little light is coming from, so they have longer stems and small caps. Now you need how much light really in the incubation rooms? In the growing rooms, you need about, they quantify this, I think it's about 1,000 lux. But to come to a point where we are practical enough, you just need light that's easy for you to read newsprint in. If you can read a newspaper in that light without straining your eyes, that's good enough light. So the bags are put in a room where you have windows that can be opened, where light can come through via those windows. Also, you need to ventilate the room, so those windows also play the significant role of ventilating the room. If you don't ventilate the room, the carbon dioxide concentration within the room is too high. You will see your mushrooms deforming as well. They don't form caps. They become this funny organism, which is not really mushroom. So you need to be sure you watch out for all these points. But after the growing room conditions are met, after the mushrooms have been introduced in there, The next thing obviously is to handle your harvest. You want to know when to harvest your mushroom. What's key there is to know what your market requires, right? So you speak to whoever is going to buy your mushrooms. They tell you what they prefer, and if you're able, you try the best you can to meet what they require, right? So in our case in Zimbabwe, I think the standard unit of packaging for mushrooms, if you're supplying supermarket stores, is 200 grams. So you find a space where you can cut up your mushrooms, removing the debris, removing the part of the substrate that's stuck to the mushrooms. After you're done cleaning, you pack into trays, conforming, of course, to what the supermarket, because each chain may call for their own color of tray. Each supermarket may call for their own, I may say 200 is the standard, but there are some supermarkets that call for 250 grams and so on and so forth. You essentially respond to what those guys require. You pannet your mushrooms properly. After you're done doing that, you deliver. What's key also is to deliver your mushrooms fresh. Oyster mushrooms don't have a very long shelf life. Just after you're done harvesting them, they need to be delivered, you know. So if you're not able to deliver on time, you need to put in place measures that allow you to be able to handle that part without really affecting the quality of product that you're giving to your clients in the Zimbabwean mushroom industry. The most key issue pertains acquiring the suitable substrate for use in mushroom production. When we're talking substrate, we're talking an equivalent of soil when we're talking about plants, right? So it's a very key input within the production cycle. Now, what's key about that issue is just like soils, you have sandy soils, you have loamy soils, you have clay, and so on and so forth. Each of these have different parameters within which they can give your crop the right sort of material, the right sort of nutrition for it to grow. Now, within mushrooms, we have the same scenario. If somebody were to ask me what substrate do you recommend people use, I'll say they need to use cotton. Now we look at the cotton supply. The cotton situation within our nation is rather erratic. So when you're trying to acquire cotton materials for production in mushroom production, in mushroom work, you will find that either you get them very expensively or you don't get them at all. Or you get material that's rather too poor for you to get the best quality of product for your market. Right? So substrate acquisition is the first key issue. Now the second key issue also pertains being able to run successful crops repeatedly. Because after establishing your project, you want to repeat the cycles. You want to be making money constantly. For you to be able to do that, contamination is one of the key challenges that you also face.
Manure. Spend mushroom substrate manure, right? You can take this and introduce it into your field and essentially boost, the capacity of your field to produce more food for you. So here we have a garden going on that's essentially utilizing this same material.